Welcome to Perfection's Clutch Installation Lab. Today we've got a 2000 Civic SI 1.6 liter VTEC with about 169,000 miles on it. Now I've taken it for a test drive, shifts just fine, no slippage, but we've got a little bit of a strange noise we're going to diagnose. The owner reports he hears it, and the only thing that makes the noise go away is when he pushes the clutch pedal all the way down. Now this bearing is turning continuously, the clutch release bearing, so we're going to find out whether it's the clutch release bearing or something else. This is with the pedal up. I'm going to take the microphone and hold it down close to transmission now. Pedal up, pedal down. Noise got quieter. Pedal up. There's our noise. Pedal down. Now I've got all the bolts out but one, so let me take the last bolt out. And we'll take the clutch off. It's intact. It's not burned up. Got some hot spots in the flywheel. I'll get you a close-up of that. But there's our intact system. Now if we go back to the customer's original complaint, I have a noise that is pronounced when the clutch pedal is up. When the clutch pedal goes down, the noise goes away. Pedal comes up about halfway, the noise starts to appear. About halfway up also is when the clutch disc starts to turn from the engagement process. From there up, we're in the friction zone. The clutch pilot bearing, we can identify its role pretty easily. It centers and supports the input shaft, mostly supports it. The dowel sleeves out here actually center the input shaft, so it supports it. That's its primary function. When is it active? When the engine is running and the clutch is engaged and you are in neutral, just sitting with the engine idling, the crankshaft, flywheel, pilot bearing, and input shaft are all turning at the same speed. The pilot bearing is inactive, there's no noise. But as soon as you push the clutch pedal down and select a gear, the input shaft stops turning, the crankshaft continues to turn, the pilot bearing is active. Now this pilot bearing is worn, we can feel little notches in it as we turn it, but if the pilot bearing was really the source of the noise, when I push down on the clutch pedal and stop the input shaft, that's when I would expect to hear the pilot bearing. So we're still looking at the clutch release bearing as the real source. It's got a lot of miles on it. You can hear it's dry inside there. Let's go ahead and take this apart, we'll service it, and start putting this Honda back together. Now the flywheel's got quite a few large hot spots, and they're all the way around the flywheel. There's also some small surface cracks starting to show up in here. So with the size and amount of hot spots on this flywheel, we do not consider this a candidate for resurfacing. Now if you want to see more about the hot spots, you can go to our website. We've got a video on there about flywheel hot spots. We've got a little demonstration about them. But this one is not a good candidate for resurfacing. So we're going to go ahead and take it off and replace this flywheel. This is the transmission input shaft spline. In the teeth of the spline, you can see the corrosion, the buildup of little flakes of rust dust. We're going to clean that all off. Get this very, very clean, and we'll go through the process of testing the clutch disc to make sure it slides free. Now I cleaned up the transmission case a little bit. The area around the ball stud's nice and clean. The guide tube on the front of the transmission where the bearing slides, and I really cleaned up the input shaft that had a lot of that corrosion on there, that red oxide, that fretting corrosion. Got rid of all that, went in there with a scratch brush, cleaned that up real good. Now the next thing I want to do is take the clutch disc with clean hands, go up to the input shaft and slide it on. Make sure it fits. Next, we're going to lubricate the input shaft. We put a pack of grease in the kits. Just high temperature wheel bearing grease. Open it up and squirt it out onto the input shaft. Try and keep your hands clean. We're going to have to handle the disc again. So distribute that on the input shaft. Now you can use the pack and distribute the grease, keeping your hands clean. Now with the clutch disc, carefully slide it on, slide it off, index it a little bit. I'm just trying to distribute that grease all over the teeth, help prevent corrosion. Then just wipe off any excess so it doesn't fling. We don't want to contaminate the friction surface. Clutch release bearing, there's a groove inside the bearing there, the bore, called a grease groove or an annular groove. I'm going to take and fill that groove up with grease. And don't get real carried away with this, but we want to make sure that grease groove is greased. This makes it slide nice. Okay, so the bearing is ready. Now there's a pocket right there where the ball stud pivots. Just want to put a good dose of grease right there. That's going to go here. I'm also going to put a little bit on the ball stud itself. Just can't grease that after you install it. You get one shot at this. And a light film on the front of the transmission on the guide tube. We already got some in the grease groove. I'm just going to put a light film right there. Now this application uses a retainer clip on the fork, so we'll slide it in there. Pinch it into the slots, and there we go. Now, I also put a little bit of grease on the fork tabs, so put this together. There you can see it slides nicely. It's locked onto the pivot ball. We got it lubricated in all the correct spots. Just make sure we wipe up any excess. Looks good. Now to install the flywheel, make sure to clean the surface of the crankshaft right here and the surface on the back of the flywheel. I've got a pin in the crank to help hold the flywheel while I position it. There it is. Got a little bit of thread locking compound in each of the bolts. That pin just helps hold the flywheel while I'm doing this. As soon as I get a couple bolts in, I'll take the pin out and save it. Now notice too, the pilot bearing is already installed. This particular application, the pilot bearing mounts from the engine side of the flywheel. So if you install the flywheel first, forget the pilot, you get to take it off and do it over. Now this is an aluminum flywheel. It's recommended to use a little bit of locking compound on the pilot bearing while you're pressing it in. Okay, the bolts are started. Now to prevent the flywheel from rotating, I just use a little piece of this channel and catch a tooth in the ring gear with one of the bolts that goes to the back of the engine. So we'll just go around in a staggered pattern and just snug these up. Now to tighten the flywheel bolts, the manual recommends 87 pound-feet of torque. I'm going to take that down in 2 steps. And always in a staggered or crisscross pattern. And notice you don't hear an impact gun. And here's our final tightening. Now before I begin bolting anything up on the flywheel, there's 2 surfaces that I have to clean. The friction surface on the flywheel and the friction surface on the pressure plate. So to take care of that, we'll just use a little bit of a brake clean type product or alcohol, rubbing alcohol. Clean the friction surface where the disc touches. You always want to keep the friction material clean. So we'll rotate the rag. And we use the same process to clean the pressure plate friction surface. Now always making sure you keep the friction surface clean. We'll start a couple bolts. Now we'll take the alignment tool, pick up the splines and the pilot. I'm going to hold that in. Now all the bolts are started and seated, and I want to confirm the position of the disc. Press in, wiggle it around a little bit, pull the tool out, picks up the pilot bearing nicely. That feels real good. Now we'll start the crisscross pattern to pull the clutch cover down against the flywheel. And for the final tightening, Honda recommends 20 pound-feet of torque. So we're going to go 20 in a staggered pattern. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Now this is a dowel sleeve. The dowel sleeve is right here in this case, in this hole. It's a very, very important part. It plays a small but critical role. This is the only device, and there's one at the back of the engine on this vehicle and one at the front. This is the only device that actually creates and controls the alignment of the transmission to the engine. It's a precision sleeve. In some cases it's a pin. When you remove a transmission, it's possible for one of these to fall off and roll away on the shop floor and never to be seen again. As you're working with these vehicles, always make sure that the dowel sleeves or pins are present and that the hole in the transmission is in good shape and hasn't been damaged previously. Now the engine is running. It's kind of a chilly day out here. We're going to go ahead and we're going to release the clutch, and I'll put the microphone back by the transmission. Tommy, clutch pedal down. Clutch pedal up, clutch pedal down, up. Well, we've completed the installation on this Honda Civic. New clutch, new hydraulic system, pilot bearing, release bearing, and flywheel. Now remember, the original complaint that we were looking at was noise related. The noise would go away when you push the clutch pedal down, and you would hear the noise as you brought the clutch pedal up. That indicated something was spinning in the transmission, contributing to the noise. Now we just took a listen to it. Today it's a little bit cooler than it was when we first shot the video, and we've changed the oil in the gearbox, put the Honda recommended lubricant in there. That change right there in the cooler temperature, I think, has made a change to how we're hearing the noise. You push the clutch pedal down, the noise goes away. You bring the clutch pedal up, we still hear a little bit of noise. So I think we're looking at a little bit of gearbox wear. If you would bring this car into your shop and not go for a pre-clutch installation test drive, you might not know everything that was going on with it, and you need to know to be prepared to answer your customer's question, how come I still hear that noise? I thought it was going to go away. If you have any questions about a clutch installation, hydraulic system, or flywheel, please call Perfection at 800-258-8312. Press 4 and your call will be routed to Tony, Steve, Bobby, or myself. And TJ, when you get back from Paris Island, enjoy your car.